welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this lovely conversation. That's, well, at least I'm assuming it's going to be a lovely conversation. I expect it will be. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Jennifer Jones. I am the current chair of the Healing Trust. And Sandy Edwards is one of our fellows, and we've invited her to come to be interviewed by Tim Ridge, who is the chair of the Dr. Healer Network. And it's a fantastic opportunity to have a conversation. You'll all know, I'm sure, about Sandy's work, and she will be able to tell you more about it. I'm going to disappear off into the background shortly, so I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Tim Ridge and Sandy Edwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer, indeed. So, yeah, a great pleasure to be asked to interview yourself, Sandy, by the Healing Trust. And I feel really with the title of the talk, I should be ultra skeptic, but it's preaching to the converted, talking to me. So imagine you're talking to the rest out there, you know, who are the the unconverted. So yes, great pleasure to talk to you, and big congratulations on the second edition of your book. I mean, this is an amazing achievement, and I'm sure most people who are listening in know about your two books. Would you just like to say a quick word about them and what they show?
Well, I'm very honoured to be here, and it's lovely talking to you again, Tim. Thank you for inviting me. Whoever invited me, I'm not sure. But it's lovely to be here. And yes, it is an amazing, the whole thing is amazing. Who pays for this kind of research? Which academics are going to nail their name to it? Which doctors allow you to do healing in their hospital? It's all magical. It truly is. If I'd written my book as a novel, it would have seemed far too far-fetched and outlandish, but it's all absolutely real. And the story of it was that I had absolutely no sign of any healing ability, but I was looking for a cure for psoriasis. There's no medical cure, so I was looking down every other avenue without success. And then someone said I should be a healer, and through doing healing, that would balance the energies would be doing something useful. And so I was signposted immediately to the NFSH, which now is known as the Healing Trust. And from the very first moment of beginning training, even though I was completely unaware of energies or colours or anything that the tutor or the other people on the course were talking about, got no sense of any of that. The people I was practicing on reported magnificent and wonderful things. So it was very exciting. And one thing and another, 2 years later, that was the minimum time of training at that time. On the way back from qualifying, I thought, oh, I could apply to the lottery to open up a voluntary healing group. So I did that, successful. And 5 years or 6 years later, a lady came for healing who'd been to the group a few times, but not with me. And it didn't say on her card where she'd heard about us from. And I always like that information, so that if we wanted to advertise, we'd be able, not that we ever paid for any advertising, but I'd be able to see what avenue to explore first. And she told me that her consultant at the hospital had sent her, which was amazing. So I got his name and address and wrote him a nice letter to the hospital, offering to give healing free of charge to his patients. And I mentioned all the professional standards that the Healing Trust adheres to. And also I mentioned Angie Buxton King, who was employed healer in London, and Ruth Kay, employed as a healer, again, in a Leeds hospital, to show that this wasn't a completely new thing. And he welcomed my offer, and it took the hospital 1.5 years to give permission, maybe because it was new and different, I don't know. And within, well, how it worked was his at the consultation with his outpatients, he might suggest to someone that they would like to have a healing session. Very often people have been ill for a very long time before they see him. And he would suggest to people they might like to have a healing session. And if they did, they would walk the 4 or 5 paces to my room next door. And they were highly skeptical people. These are people who were not looking for healing. It had really been jumped on them. They didn't expect any positive outcome. In fact, several people told me, eyeball to eyeball, this will not help me. All I need is more medication, or the right medication. I need surgery, whatever. And as well, you've got nothing else to do now for 20 minutes, so you might as well just enjoy a healing session. And after the 20 minutes, they had a different experience of things. And Dr. Singh would often, at the beginning, he would ask to see those patients straight after their healing session to see how they fared. And some of the responses were incredible. These people, as I said, had got problems that hadn't been addressed by medical means. And yet in 20 minutes, something completely new and different was occurring. And after a few weeks, I asked Dr. Singh if I could do an audit so that these things that people were saying were captured and registered, recorded. So I put together a questionnaire, and that was approved by the hospital. And these showed in graph form how different people felt after this one healing session. And also I gave them a questionnaire the same to do a week later. And it showed that they were still benefiting from this one 20-minute healing session a week later. So that was amazing. And then I started in the August, and in the November of the same year, it might have been the August, September, and in the November the same year, I had an email from another Healing Trust member who I'd never heard of, never met, never seen her ever, never heard from her since. But she sent me an email telling me that the National Lottery had just announced funding for research that would help people and that people wanted. They didn't want just academic research that was just for the sake of it. And my audit ticked those 2 boxes. So I took this news in with me to Dr. Singh. He'd seen enough now to know that this was something interesting. And he luckily was also a consultant, a senior lecturer at the University of Birmingham's Medical School. And so he was highly well positioned to get the university on board, which he did. And the research money had to be applied for by a charity, and the Healing Trust really wasn't up to doing that. But as it happened, another stroke of luck was that Dr. Singh was the trustee of a medical charity in Birmingham that used traditional medication alongside complementary therapies, and NFSH Healing Trust members were part of the complementary team. So he brought together, he's the hero of healing in this whole story. He was willing to nail his name to this unusual mast, and he got everybody involved. We got the money, £205,000, against a huge amount of competition. You can just imagine it. But the University of Birmingham is world-class research that they're known for. They're in the Russell Group of universities, which is the UK equivalent of the Ivy League in the States. So they are the cream, which means they're the cream of the world, really. And so the research shows there were 200 people with medically incurable conditions. So that's IBS, 100 people with that, and 100 patients with inflammatory bowel disorder. So that's ulcerative colitis. That was the idea. Well, it's a horrible disease. And the idea was to get 100 people with that, but it's far less common, thankfully. and it was too difficult to populate the trial with just ulcerative colitis, so then it was expanded to Crohn's disease, which is even worse. And so the idea was to compare IBS, which has no physical problems with the body that show up on any tests, compared to, so it's called a syndrome, not a disease, comparing the results with the diseased people in the other 100. So that was the idea. And the results are excellent, whichever way you measure them. There are three major ways that medical research is expressed in results, and one of them is clinical. Oh, I should have made a note of these, shouldn't I? But it's score improvements, really. Clinical, oh, you can help me out with this, Tim. You would know this. So there's clinical results, statistical results, and effect sizes. Those are the three. And all of them are excellent, far in excess of what a pharmaceutical would need to achieve to get their product on to the register. So why not healing? Well, when the research papers came about, there are two research papers. One's qualitative, so that's physical measuring, and then quantitative, which is what people think about it. So it's putting the flesh on the bones of the research figures, facts and figures. And all of the different things that the University of Birmingham put together correlated with each other. So they reconfirmed and triply confirmed and quadruply confirmed that these results are real. Powerful evidence.
Yeah.
But the research papers have to go into a medical journal, and medical journals don't always want spiritual healing muddying their papers, their journals, their pages. And so one of the big ones, which shall remain nameless, that everybody would know, rejected it, saying that their members don't believe in complementary therapies. Didn't seem very scientific excuse or reason for a scientific organization. Another one, the editor seemed positive, another very well-known one that everybody knows the name of. The editor seemed very positive, but he couldn't find enough medical doctors to review it. So we had to go somewhere else and somewhere else until online medical journals did take it up. That actually is better, because anybody, they don't have to be a doctor, they don't have to be an academic, they don't have to be belonging to anything, they don't have to pay to see anything, they can read the whole papers free of charge online. So that worked out really very well. I'm a bit dry now, so I'll have a drink.
You've done very well there in outlining very concisely your work. And of course, that led to the first book.
Yes.
You had to self-publish.
Yes, because I couldn't take it to a publisher, because while any research is taking place, you can't tell anybody about it. It has to remain completely secret. So it's the same as having a court case where nobody's allowed to discuss the evidence before the jury sees it. So the jury in a journal are the peer reviewers. So until they've given their verdict, because their verdict isn't that spiritual healing is good or bad, their review is to say that the research itself is really well done. That's all. That's really what they're doing, isn't it?
Statistically significant and those sort of buzzwords indeed. But how did you get it done, the book? Well,
I had to learn everything about self-publishing, which was another major. When you think about the research trial, from the moment I told Dr. Singh about this opportunity to the time that the research papers were published in medical journals, that in itself was 10 years. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But that's how long it took. It's no mean feat. And it's so incredible that I was on the steering group, so I knew what was happening at every stage. But every single person on that steering group, they're all PhDs or medical doctors or Dr. Singh as a consultant, and little me. I mean, I didn't go to further education. I didn't do A-levels. So anyway, I had to do self-publishing because I couldn't take it to a publisher. So I didn't know that anybody in the world would ever buy a book. So I didn't want to spend any money on doing this. And so I learned how to get the words to be on the paper, how to get the numbers on the pages, where to have the title of the book on each page, and what the rules are to make it look professional. Oh my word. What a ridiculous number of things. Well, I did my best. And then you've got to do all of the referencing. There were 200 other research papers that I referenced in this, because I didn't want to make a statement without research to underpin what I was saying. So the amount of research I had to look, and because I'm not a member of anything, I couldn't just go to a library or access anything like academic people can, or members of organizations can. It was just little me in my bedroom, in the study. That was it. And so I was having to trawl the internet and find out where I can look. I could find the headings of a research paper, but I couldn't access the words. So without doing a big dig. And so that was a huge amount of work as well. I can't tell you how much.
But highly successful. Listening to your description of how things unfolded, the impression is of someone walking through a corridor and the doors keep opening in front of you and you walk through. Doors keep opening and you walk through.
You wouldn't believe it. And how I even opened the door to the self-publishing thing was incredible as well. We were trawling around in Swanage, where I now live, but we were just on holiday. We had a caravan here, and saw an advert in a window for for people to join this spiritually minded meditation group. Well, I made contact with the guy, and he was in a caravan 3 doors along, which was weird. And he had just self-published a book, so he was able to give me an idea. But actually, his idea was far too complicated. And when I started talking to other people about it, I did have the easiest way to do it, which was, well, that doesn't exist anymore. So it was just at that time, how these things just keep, as you said, doors opening. It's amazing. So that gave me the idea it is possible. And then other people came up with the best idea for but then my own, when the research trial was published in a medical journal, then on that day, I was now ready to press the button for my book to be made available online and through Amazon, and also a web page, and also Facebook, and also whatever else I wouldn't ever have dreamed of investigating. Oh dear. I mean, I'm not a young thing. So this social media business is all new and different. So I've been dragged into some century that's way ahead of where I was ever thinking of. So, and because my husband had retired by now, we were traveling 6 months of a year. But in this little window between coming back from Europe for Christmas, New Year, in those few days before we were now off on another 3-month adventure where you couldn't possibly hope probably to access the internet. It was 2 days before we went away that this got published, and then pressing the button for all of this to splurge out there. And so that was amazing too. And then, so with my own attempts at advertising that this research exists, that's the whole point. I mean, I just felt I ought to write a book. This
Yeah.
was something that Katrina Brook, who was a trustee, and Dr. Jean Galbraith and I had talked about. The Healing Trust needs a book to tell people what this is about. And so now we have one, really. I know it's a book I've written, so it's not really the Healing Trust book, but it says Healing Trust all over it. And so this is the best that we can come up with so far until someone else does one. But this is a wonderful thing that just kind of, well, it doesn't land on your lap. I mean, you make efforts and you've got your ideas, you do your cosmic shopping of what it is you want, and you make it clear to the universe what exactly it is you want, and then it knows what to bring. So this is, I didn't realize I was doing cosmic shopping, actually. I just realized that later on when someone talked of it. Oh, well, that's how all this happened. But it wasn't just this, it's stuff that's gone on in my life. You wouldn't believe all, well, yes, of course you believe all the coincidences. So then what happened? So just by doing my own methods of, advertising, I probably sold about 700 copies, which is amazing to me. But then a German publisher, a couple of years down the line, would it be 3 years down the line, contacted me, and they tried to contact me through social media, which of course I had no idea they were trying to contact me. So it was like 3 or 4 attempts of theirs before I thought, oh, look at this. And I thought it was a hoax, because maybe because this German publisher was asking if they could please translate my book into German and sell it for me. That, hurrah! So they have the German rights on the book, and unbelievably, they sold 1,800 copies in the first 9 weeks.
Wow.
Well, so that's another wow. And at this point as well, this is another amazing thing, that the chap whose little ad, my husband saw it actually, who was in the caravan 3 doors down, he put me in touch with somebody else who put me in touch with somebody else who is at Findhorn, that is connected now with the largest publisher in the world, they say, in this genre. And so I asked them, I had now an inroad to speak to, because they have so many publications that writers are asking them to look at. You need to have some kind of inroad with somebody. And I tried every which way. I asked Angie Buxton King if I could speak to whoever published hers, and I got nowhere. And anybody else I knew who'd got published, I got nowhere. And now this door was open, and I got nowhere to start with. They said it didn't have enough international appeal. So then I realized afterwards that the German company had sold so many books, and also by then famous people who are bestsellers in America. Oh, if only I could think of their names. They're so famous, and I can't think of their names. And they'd gone out and bought a copy of my book and read it, and had the kindness to send me an email to say how thrilled they were with Larry Dossey. Larry Dossey was one. And wow. So then a few other people as well. Oh, this is pitiful that I can't remember their names. But anyway, I got back onto Findhorn, their traditions, and another name, that Inner Traditions, that's the other name that they go by, different labels that they have for the same company. So I went back and said, well, if this research, which is magnificent, had been published in Japan, I would have been just as interested. It's just as real, just as important. And these people in Germany, look what they've done. And these people in America who are bestsellers, this is what they say. And so how about thinking about it again? And they did. And I got a contract. So yes, brilliant.
Absolutely. So, wow.
Amazing. And and also a German filmmaker had been over by then as well. And but his film, which took in people like Rupert Sheldrake and other famous people, and the only thing that was a problem for that was that it was launched as COVID came about. So hopefully maybe later on he might be able to. It did go into cinema. I was impressed that people in Germany pay cinema price tickets to go and see films like he made in a cinema. Amazing. And it was in German cinemas and in Switzerland and in Austria, but it was COVID, so not many people would stride out.
I mean, that's an incredible sequence of events. And there were 5 years, am I right, between the two editions, 2016 through to 2021, is that right?
I thought about 4, I thought. I don't know.
I think the original one, my copy's got 2016 in it, so that's, I just worked out.
Okay, yes, it is.
Did they make changes? Because
did they make
a lot of changes in the new edition?
They crossed out so much stuff, I nearly cried. Yes, and I thought that was really interesting story, you know, but they said they didn't want it to be too British, so they took out. But I started getting wise to this, and I said, well, what about putting this bit in later on? And so I did manage to get some of it back in, but it's I think there was a bit of a loss, but there were other gains as well. So, but the fact that a publisher took it on, because no publisher takes on a book that was self-published already. So that's really another incredible thing. I can't believe how much help we must have had from other avenues.
Upstairs.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Another door, isn't it? Another big door that came open for you there.
Yes, yes. And so, and a filmmaker has been the other week now to Swanage for a TV program. I can't say who, what, why, or anything. And so that's all about the contents of my book, which again is the Healing Trust over and over again. So more and more coverage, raising awareness, let's hope.
It's a real success story. It really is, Sandy. Just going back to your own personal history, you know, going back, you said, you know, you'd never had any inclination that you had, you know, sensitivity to energy. What was your family background and belief system? And was that encouraging or discouraging to this whole area, do you think?
There was no evidence of being of any particular, other than the normal C of E if you're filling in a form. And of course we were packed off to Sunday school because that was free babysitting. And it's true. And we had a family car, but we weren't allowed in it. So we had to walk for miles to get, I think they found the furthest away one. So the three of us trotted off to Sunday school. But of course, churches don't normally welcome the idea of healing either, even though the greatest healer ever was Jesus. And I don't know why the church threw healing out in those early years, but they're bringing it back in, it seems now. And I did have the joy and wonder of being at a what do they call it? High church, Anglican church with the incense and the Hail Mary. Not Hail Mary. Well, do they do Hail Marys? They have. It looks just Catholic to me, and I had the honour of giving healing with the priest at the altar during Mass several times. I won't say who, why, or whatever, in case he got into trouble. But that was totally amazing. So
it wasn't your family background that led you into it. It was really just the circumstance of having the psoriasis where you were an answer to that.
Yes.
But I think the first edition that you actually went to a medium who told you you'd become a healer. Is that right?
Well, yes. Something I don't often say, but well, I might as well say it now, is that I was always afraid of anything that I might sense, or if anything were to occur in a room that wasn't physical. And I thought, I've got to just learn about everything you can't see. And then by knowing, have it learned, then you can't be afraid of what you now know. And so so once I made that decision, it's another one of these situations, isn't it? I went to work as I had done every day, and now there was this massive sign saying spiritual awareness course starts this week. And that was, as it turned out, this spiritualist church, which I'd never noticed before, that I'd passed every day. And so I thought, well, I'll sign up. So I went to their awareness course, and that was really a good course. It was a fantastic course, but I had no sense of any of the things that they were teaching about. It was utterly useless. And I sometimes, other people said to me, why do you still come? But somehow I just struggled along. And so I spent 7 years doing that. And
wow.
It wasn't training all the time, because classes dwindle, and then they don't send you the best trainers anymore. And so it becomes a meditation group. And so that was the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But I still was hardly sensing anything. And
yeah.
And then I don't know how come I was referred to this. Oh, yes, that's right. It wasn't even a healer. It was a hypnotist I went to get rid of psoriasis. And he worked in hospitals. He was an amazing man. And but it did work for giving up smoking. He said, make a list of all the things you want sorted. And so I got 4 things on the list. Public speaking was one of them. And this is something I had a huge problem with. And I thought, I've got to get over this public speaking issue, because I can't tell anybody about healing. And I made this decision. Actually, it was at the healing group that I made this decision. I'm getting off my story, aren't I? You asked me about this healer. Now, so the hypnotist, as it turned out, he said, come back for another session and we'll find it then. Well, I did go, and he said, I can't find what the route is, but what I can do for you, there's a trance medium that comes to my house once a year. She lives on the Isle of Wight, and maybe you could see her. I said, all right then, do anything. So that was the lady,
yeah,
who steered me to the Healing Trust. Well, NFSH as it was then. So that was, and she channeled White Feather.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And many years later, through a cousin showing me a photograph of my grandmother, who I'd never ever met, she had a white feather in the front of her hat, and she never parted with that feather. It was always in the front of her hat. So curious.
The right people have always come along at the right time for you, haven't they? It seems.
It's astonishing, totally astonishing.
Pointing up, you mentioned Jean Galbraith. She always used to talk about upstairs management. So I think they've been hard at work with you, haven't they?
But I have been asking all the time as well.
Well, you have to ask, yes, you have to ask.
Yes, I think we do need to know what, and we're prepared to make the moves. When something occurs, we have to be prepared to step up. And I've had to step up over and over. Oh,
you've done that. So
yeah.
That's your background. I wanted to just ask about your experience working in the hospital in Birmingham. And obviously you had a wonderful relationship with Dr. Singh.
Yes.
And I think you said a little bit about the other staff, but I mean, how do you deal with the skeptics and the outright hostile ones? And you must have met the whole range of reactions, I should think.
Well, nobody was hostile as a patient, because they'd just seen Dr. Singh, who's so empathetic. He's just a wonderful person. He's lovely. Yeah. So they're already on a cloud. And because he's the one who suggested it and he is God to them, then they already are in a positive mind frame. And I just smile. I've had people who are so totally skeptical. There was one young lad who's in my book, and he'd been suffering for a good long while. Dr. Singh doesn't see children normally, but a paediatrician asked him as a special favour because he knew of Dr. Singh's reputation. And so Dr. Singh couldn't help this poor boy either. And after, well, this young lad told me all he needed was more medication. But within 20 minutes, half an hour, he was smiling, colour in his cheeks, and no pain. And when I took him back to his mum, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She went white, the colour drained from her face and her jaw literally dropped. But she was so taken aback that they were in a rush to a blood test now. So she whisked him away. And anyway, Dr. Singh went and interviewed him at home. And the interview, even though he was a young lad at the time, he was probably 11, he was so eloquent, and it was fantastic to hear what he had to say. And Dr. Singh plays that tape to Grand Rounds, which is a gathering where all the medical people on the site of, say, a hospital or a university come and listen to an expert on a new field or a new finding. And so he continues to play that to new groups and to medical students at the university.
Is Dr. Singh still working there?
Yes, and he still would love to find a healer to work alongside him, but it's so difficult to find somebody. I've searched over and over. When I first began there, I did manage to find healers to come and work at the hospital who went on to work in other departments, but you don't find volunteers on trees. It's very difficult, and very often people don't have the finance to just volunteer their time in the week, in the day. They have to earn a living. And so it's very hard. And when those volunteers that I did find, I didn't want to strip people from the voluntary group either, because that's every time I saw anybody at the hospital, I gave them a leaflet and go to the healing group, because I didn't have the time myself to be giving people a series of healing sessions, and I wanted to introduce more people to healing. So I gave them a leaflet about the healing group, and they would have to go there if they wanted more sessions. But not many people ever did, because Dr. Singh found, through speaking to his patients afterwards, even people who had a full recovery, but they wouldn't go anywhere. Well, a full recovery in some ways, but maybe they had something else. But they didn't want to go anywhere outside of a medical setting, and they didn't want to see anyone other than me or people who they knew had been given a clearance by the hospital or by Dr. Singh. They were too afraid.
So when did you finish at Birmingham?
When I moved to the South Coast.
So he's been without her for several years now.
Yes, that would be 8 years, is it? No, 6 years. 6 years.
So obviously the voluntary healing difficulty that you referred to, the other option, of course, would be to set up some sort of charitable fundraising, which obviously that's the sort of model that Angie Buxton King has got with her Sunflower Trust, Sam Buxton Sunflower Trust, in memory of her son Sam. Also, Suzanne Ruggles at St George's Hospital has her own charity, the Full Circle Fund for therapies. I mean, that would sound like the answer. Otherwise, it's really sort of lost its position there.
Yes.
Do you think that's an option?
Well, I can't do anything about that option, I'm afraid. I'm too far away to be a hands-on help with any of that, but I'm sure, well, I don't know.
You mentioned Dr. Singh was on a trust of an integrated therapy type charity.
And that's another interesting thing, that after the research was published, that organization closed down. So I think it actually just before the research papers were published. So it was amazing that everything stayed in place until this research was published. And the individuals on the steering committee were still, steering group, were still prepared to do everything necessary to get the papers published.
Yeah, that would have been an opportunity. It's a shame that that's gone by the board, really.
I think they had trouble with funding themselves, actually. Right. I think that was part of the issue.
Yeah. I think that's really the what we want to see, to reproduce the sort of wonderful work that you've done. We want to see models that can be then sort of applied elsewhere, which is where Angie Buxton King has been so successful with getting healers into 40+ hospitals now. Wonderful. But I think that's always the problem, isn't it? You mentioned Ruth Kay as well up in Leeds earlier, and we've been in contact with her. And of course, you know, she's been a one-off, hasn't she, in a way? And it so often depends on personalities. You know, you've been so wonderful doing what you've done, but you had Dr. Singh. And the next, if he retired and the next gastroenterologist came in who said, I don't believe in all that, you know.
Yes.
It's tragic.
I think even if he were to retire and there was a paid healer, you may not get somebody who would refer patients to you. There was a battery of consultants working in his clinic very often, and one of them told me that he couldn't see a place for healing at that hospital, in that clinic, or in any place within the NHS. That's what he told me. But another consultant, well, he was a registrar, so he was waiting for a proper consultancy position. And he said he would definitely get healers in once, but he wouldn't be able to do it until he was well established enough. So they're risking their reputation and their career. Yeah.
Angie put a comment in the chat box just there saying, why doesn't Dr. Singh get funds from the Healing Trust to pilot a paid post for a year, sort of similar to her model?
Well, if the trust has the money, that would be lovely.
We're dropping a hint here, aren't we?
Just barge in for a moment. We probably don't, but it's a nice idea, Angie. I know she's here, obviously. It's certainly an idea to look at, certainly. Thank you for that.
It makes one think whether we, as you know, combined forces of organisations with an interest of fostering healing in the healthcare situation ought to set up, you know, a research fund or, you know, a charitable fund for just this purpose. And I know we, as Dr. Healer Network, we've got a certain amount of money put aside for research funds, but we have got a question there about how much we're talking about. And I think we're talking, you know, thousands of pounds a year for, you know, even a part-timer, aren't we? For a paid position.
With Dr. Michael Dixon has healers at his, and they charge separately. Not much, I don't think, but the facility is there. And so that shows that there are different ways to make healing available. But Dr. Singh said, not that I was asking for any money off patients, but he said money doesn't change hands in an NHS setting normally. That's not what people expect. And people do have the expectation that all of their healthcare will be free. And so there might be a resistance there.
I don't think the suggestion was that patients should be paying for their healing. I think the suggestion was doing fundraising, you know, of some sort, of which there are many different types. You know, organisations. Angie had experience with pop groups at the start of the Sam Buxton. Deep Purple, I believe, was the one. And there are all sorts of ways one could raise significant amounts to, especially if we all work together and combine forces to make it happen. Are you still in touch with Dr. Singh, may I ask?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll let him know when there's any advance, you know, any progress in making. And he's interviewed for the filmmakers that came the other day.
We'll have to keep a note of that, about a possibility of trying to get healers back into his clinic while he's still there. I think that would be brilliant.
Yes, it would be
worth following up on. I think let's do that.
I've still been making moves on that. Yeah, the idea, I mentioned Dr. Michael Dixon's method of having healing made available, just to mention there's different ways of not to wipe out the idea of funding, because funding would be great for a healer to be made available.
Well, let's keep that firmly in mind. Coming back to your journey, so to speak, I did spot in your book somewhere towards the back where you mentioned in my next book.
Oh no, I never said no. I'm never writing another book. Somebody else must have written that. Oh, my next book. Oh my goodness.
It looked like it was in a comment made when you were talking, you know, in a patient context, you know, about someone
Yes, that was only if different people sent me their healing stories, and then I would just print those, you know, get those into print somehow as a book. But minimal effort for me this time. My goodness. And with the publishing of the second edition, I couldn't believe how much work, how many hours I had to be involved in that as well. Unbelievable. I didn't have to do a single thing for the German one, nothing. And so it was a shock.
Amazing how it's gone, you know, how it's all unfolded, as I said. So we can't get you back into a healthcare facility anywhere then, Sandy?
Well, I would volunteer my services at an NHS venue locally to me here, but we, under normal circumstances, of course, COVID's made a difference to everything. We're normally away for 6 months of a year, overseas. So it's it would only be a 6-month option,
unless you had a team.
Yes. But finding Healing Trust, I live in a very long cul-de-sac, really. Swanage, Dorset, tiny weenie, and to have Healing Trust healers here, I'm not sure there's many or enough or what. I've met one so far. So there'd be healers of different descriptions, but I'm all for Healing Trust healing, really, because I know the standards are there. When I ran the healing group, I would only have Healing Trust healers.
I think that's what you're, you know, familiar with, and you've trained with, and you're you know, allied to. But of course, there are many different healers around, and you know, on the other hand, Reiki is very strong.
Yes.
That was, I wanted to ask you, in your first book, Healing in a Hospital, second book, you've gone for spiritual healing in hospitals and clinics. And I mean, that's quite a bold reversion to the, you know, the spiritual healing title, which working inside hospitals and, you know, in the medical profession does tend to raise hackles a bit.
Yes.
What was your reasoning behind that, with that title?
None at all. The publishers said, we'll have this title. So, all right then. So I think that was how it went.
Yeah.
But they had to make it look different to make it a second edition. So there were a lot of changes, so many changes, couldn't believe. But the title had to be different and the look of the book had to be different.
Yeah, yeah. And Angie was commenting there in response to what we were saying, that professional standards, you know, can be applied across the different paradigms of learned healing. Just
yes, absolutely.
A particular one, which is of course the big sort of challenge in terms of trying to get a healing register, which was something that was quite on the agenda maybe 20 years ago, like the chiropractors, but has proved to be quite a sticking point in getting consensus, really. But getting quality healers wherever they have trained, having professional standards should be relatively straightforward. And I've had this idea that rather like in the yoga world, because I'm in the yoga world as well, there's the Yoga in Healthcare Alliance, YIHA, YIHA, which is it's a collective, but it's all aimed at health, yoga in healthcare. Well, we could do just the same without having a register, unfortunately, which seems, you know, a little bit out of touch, out of reach. We could have a similar Healing in Healthcare Alliance, which we'd have YIHA. It makes me laugh that it's sort of like, you know, you're challenging people to have a laugh because, you know, are you having a laugh, you know? It's like healing.
Yes. As regards the healing group, I felt responsible for what was happening there, and so I, rather than have any risk whatever, I only had Healing Trust members there. But in my book, all of the research is across the board. The research papers that I've cited are every kind of healing. And but what I really enjoy about, and what I really value about the Healing Trust thing, is not having to ask the person what's the matter with them. I don't think it matters at all, and I never ask anybody. And to what were the other things that I like about it? That there's nothing mediumistic and there's nothing psychic about it, and I like that. You could have people reject having healing because they don't want you to know anything about them, and if they feel that you could be psychic, then and they're safe with me. I've got no chance. But in any case, I don't like that idea of some people say to me afterwards, what did you pick up? I said, well, nothing. So I'm a disappointment to those people. But I think it's like going through someone's handbag without asking, or even if they said, look through my handbag, I don't want to. No. I think just deliver the healing. That's our only remit. That's it.
In the Dr. Healer Network, we are rather sort of ecumenical about healing. We feel, although there's many different types of healing that are taught from different philosophies and different religious backgrounds, you know, different countries all have their different sort of ways of looking at it. We think that really there is just energy healing. It is one thing.
It is.
Just, you know, approached from different angles and different styles and all the rest of it. And I think whatever people have learned to do in healing, as you say, it's delivering the energy, it's delivering the goods. And I think Angie Buxton-King's training for healing in hospitals that she has been running obviously prepares people potentially from any healing background, how to behave, what to do, what not to do, how to talk, how to understand terminology and all that. And I know that Suzanne Ruggles at St George's Hospital, where her work in the haematology area, originally anyway, spread, she has the same sort of approach of getting her team, you know, tuned in and taught how to behave in the NHS, because, you know, you can't go wafting around maybe doing what you might do normally if you're on your own. So it's a challenge, isn't it?
Yes. I think Dr. Singh was probably pleased when we met that I wear ordinary clothes and I look more like the admin people in the hospital than anybody else. And I've always just stuck to whatever I was trained to do. I haven't gone, you know, healers sometimes do different things once they're out on their own, but not me. I just do exactly as we were taught. I can't afford to do anything different. I'm not psychic. Wait, of course, we're all psychic and we're all mediums and we're all healers. I know that, but I don't do that. No.
I totally agree with you that, you know, healing is a natural part of the human condition.
Yes.
And reading up in just doing a bit of background reading in preparation for tonight, I was looking back to the conference I went to when I first joined the Dr. Healer Network, which was 30 years ago. And that was a conference at Regent's College that Dan Benor, our founder, put on. And the keynote speaker was Valerie Hunt. I don't know if you've ever come across Professor Hunt, who's passed now, but she was doing research in America, in Los Angeles, into the human bioenergy field, and developing amazing techniques for, I think she developed an instrument called the aura meter, aura as in the human aura. And I remember at the conference, we were shown video recordings which showed children running around. You could actually see the streams of energy from their chakra points.
Wow.
Streaming behind them as they ran along, you know. But I'm going to start putting up articles about Valerie on the DHN Facebook page, so watch out for it there. Put the first one up today. But she was very interesting, and like we now talk about healing, it's to do with quantum physics, and, you know, Nikola Tesla gets commented on, etc. But Valerie was very much on that wavelength, that the human energy field is the source of imbalance. There is the source of ailments, not the biochemical, it's the bioenergy. And you know, you might sort of measure all sorts of blood tests and you know, correct or try and correct imbalances, but you need to actually go further up. That's downstream, she called it. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's an amazing thing, really. The human energy field is something that has been referred to by cultures going back thousands of years, and is present in all sorts of art history, where you see auras and, you know, energy fields. And you mentioned about Jesus Christ and you know, the halo effect of auras, and the multicolored sort of layered energy field or light body, you know, using various terms. So I think it's one of the arms I see is the scientific measurement of these things, which will bring about acceptance. Your sort of research showing, yes, it actually works, is one thing, even though that bounces off the brains of skeptics who say, well, it couldn't work, therefore that must be wrong, you know.
Yeah.
But we've got to keep on doing what you're doing, and we've got to keep on finding out research. And obviously the groups like the Research Council for Complementary Medicine are gathering from all over healing research, as well as obviously all other complementary medicine research. So we need all those things, but we need to actually be knocking on the door repeatedly and putting it in front of people repeatedly. Otherwise, it will be 100 years down the line, like so many things in medicine. You know, if you look at the history of medicine, acceptance is so slow. Oh.
Yes, but it's not just healing that they're so slow to accept in the medical and the scientific world. Quantum physics they haven't accepted for, what, 50 years before, I think it was 50 years before they started thinking it was possible, even though there was loads of evidence for it. And I've mentioned on NASA's website about, anybody could look on NASA's website and see that they say that scientists, even with the most sophisticated equipment, can only see or register less than 5% of all there is. And the other 95% is invisible. They call it dark matter or dark energy, two different things, which sounds sinister, but it means just that it can't be seen. And they know it exists, though, because it affects the things that they can see and measure with the sophisticated equipment. And that's all we're saying as healers. There's an energy going on because we can see from the results.
Yeah, we're so with you on one. So with you. It's funny you should mention that, because we've got a Zoom talk at the Dr. Healer Network at the end of the month by one of our members, Dr. Samantha Lawton, who's talking about all that sort of, theory of how the cosmos works, and string theory, dark matter, etc., etc., etc. Do come along.
Yes. As far as putting this in front of people, I'm continuing to get interviews online with different facilitators, mostly in the States, and I think mostly in the States. I can't think now. And excitingly, I should have one coming up with Bernie Siegel.
Yeah.
So some of the, there's some really, I'm so honoured but I keep contacting people all the time saying, I think you should know about this research. And now and again, people pop back and say, oh, I'd like to interview you. So
not surprising.
Keep going.
Not surprisingly at all, Sandy, because, it's a fairly unique thing that, you've gone in and done the work, but you've decided to make it a research project which has shown conclusive results. And
yes.
That hasn't really happened very often. I know Dan, you mentioned Dan Benor's collection of healing research, but that's quite ancient now, isn't it? That work.
It doesn't matter how old a piece of research is, it's still there, it's still true.
It's still there, but
it doesn't matter how old.
You've got to show
in my view,
significance and all that, and the trial has got to be looked at and said, yes, that's a good quality trial, etc. So you've got to jump through a few hoops, haven't you, to get acceptance? And
my word, yes.
Yeah. So we need to see more of this sort of research. I think the Healing Trust knows of some that might be in the offing. I think that's been mentioned. There might be some more research coming along through the Open University, but that's probably a bit far away just yet.
I can update you on the Open University thing, because we were, this is Jennifer, we were approached by the Open University for a particular piece of research, and they were looking for funding, they were seeking funding, and sadly they were not granted the funding, which they were very sad about, and so were we. So there's still people wanting to do things, I'm fairly sure.
Yeah.
Things like
on the funding front for this research, the lottery said they would only offer this research funding once. They would never do it again. It had never happened before. And subsequent to writing my book, I looked to see, I was thinking to put it into the second edition, but they didn't want it mentioned. But it was interesting to find that it was actually a gift from the Roundtree Foundation. And when I looked up their reason for being, it had nothing to do with this kind of work. Their reason for being is about poverty and educating people. So how they stepped out of their usual, I mean, that since the 1800s, they've never stepped out of that, but everything just lined up for this research to take place. Amazing. And interestingly, the method of applying was so complicated that they put 2 different workshops on so that you could go and learn how to apply. And I had to go to Bolton or somewhere for the second one. And the person I was sitting next to was representing ulcerative colitis group charity. And so that was interesting. That was the only one that there was that was to do with anything similar to our research, but they didn't get the funding for their research, sadly. Yeah. But hopefully ours would help them.
Money is tight post-COVID just for the moment, and hospitals are probably having a big struggle just keeping going with the normal work, let alone research work. And Angie added a comment there to say there's plenty of good quality Reiki research trials.
Yes.
I'm not sure if those are hospital-based or because that was what I was really referring to, work like yours, where healing in hospitals or in primary care is sort of written up and published. That's what we need, because it's the evidence-based medicine mojo, isn't it, that works in the medical world. That's what we need to be able to bring out in force, really, to help change opinions and get things adopted widely.
Yes.
We'd all like to see.
Yes. And I think healing is so important for every single person anyway, even if you only trained to give healing to yourself or your loved ones. It's very empowering and makes yourself more fit and able to help other people because of the grounding and the attuning part, instead of using your own energy by accident. That's so vital. And I've made the mistake myself and seen it in action where I've forgotten to go through the grounding and the attuning before visiting a sick friend. And as she answered the door, she was all bent over, and as she saw me, she lit up and she strengthened and straightened, and I depleted. And I realized she's taken all my energy, or I just gave it, whichever way. But that was a big reminder for me. We have to look after ourselves first and foremost.
Totally. Yes, the whole aspect of COVID in the last 2 years has been a really big wake-up call, I think, across the medical world about the need for self-care, hasn't it? I think there's been so much coming out, published, or in newspapers about the need for, nutrition and, not being obese because of the risk factors that have been highlighted, and fitness. And I think that's the emphasis, really. And we can't all carry on like the NHS started with. There's going to be a pill for every ill. We can't keep on that basis. Just take a pill and it'll be all right. We need to be looking after ourselves, in mind, body, and spirit, and prevention being the best option.
Yes. You mentioned that you're involved in yoga, and the yoga magazine that comes out to all members of the yoga world, I suppose, I don't know, but worldwide, they've got I think 3-page article about this research. And there's been a number of magazines that have been very generous with their publications. So more and more people have had the opportunity, at least, to get to know about this research and therefore about the Healing Trust.
And I think you mentioned you'd been filmed by Dina Barnett.
Yes, but that film hasn't reached its final, whatever it needs to become released.
Unfortunately, poor old Dina.
Yes,
He got stuck aboard. But it'd be good to see more films being. There's just had one come out that Anna Dear Judith of the chakra teaching renown has just brought out, which is I think a 5-part docu-series on healing, which I've just started. Sounds very interesting. Looks good quality, so I shall enjoy that one. It'd be good to see Dina. She's local to us originally. Her father was just road in Potter's Bar, and we got to meet her in the DHN. But it has been a money problem for her, really.
Yeah.
But she's done a great job with her filming, going all around the world, filming different people. Larry Dossey popped up, of course, as well. Yeah.
On her film as well, she wanted to have Dr. Singh and me and others filmed in the hospital, and that was another complete fluke, because I thought, and there were only a couple of days to go, and I thought I'll just phone this director of the hospital or whatever he was, and I thought it's going to just take an age, not going to be possible. And I got straight through to him personally, and I said, look, I've been a volunteer here for 7 years, and this film crew want to come. He said, yes, all right. So he put it in place for them to be able to film. So she's got some really good footage, probably, presume, I don't know. You never know what it's going to look like in the end. But no. But at least it was in a medical setting.
Well, Dr. Singh is proving a very positive influence, and I think that there are an increasing number of doctors, and whether they're in primary care or secondary care, who are open-minded, but are sort of more ready to, I think, to step in with the right approaches being made to make it easy to happen, like yourself popping up, or like the Sam Buxton Sunflower Trust provision. And I think, I'd like to see the idea of an alliance being formed. And I think there's a certain degree of this already coalescing around the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary. As you know, we're meeting up again at the end of June, aren't we? And
yes.
Oh yeah. And that's a talk aimed at primarily at doctors or healthcare professionals down at the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary on the 29th of June. And so if anyone knows of anyone, doctors particularly, that is interested, it's a free afternoon from 2 to 5. And as I said, Sandy will be there. Suzanne Ruggles, who I mentioned earlier, from St George's Hospital, and also down at Brighton, their Full Circle Fund has outreach to Brighton. She'll be there, and we're just hoping maybe to get another speaker to be confirmed. And that will be a sort of a start of trying to just really spread what you've done and what other people are doing already, and Angie, what she's done already. So I think, for doctors to see that someone else has already, crossed the threshold and nothing has, no disaster has happened, and, it's actually been beneficial. I think that's going to be, spreading that word is very important. So your publication is just, gold dust in that respect, in my opinion. It really is.
Thank you so much. The researchers were actually very impressed at the number of people who took up the opportunity once invited to be on the trial. And they were thoroughly impressed that so few people dropped out. In fact, one lady dropped out, I mentioned in the book, after one session because she had no symptoms after that. And so she said that it would be a waste of her time and ours if she continued. But the problem was her data couldn't be included in the trial. So the trial would have, the research results would have been better if those, but there might have been more than just her who didn't continue for that reason. So it's a shame, maybe, but at least she was resolved. So that's good news, always good news.
Dropped out cured, I like it.
Yeah. And also they also established that there were no adverse effects by anybody in the told 200 patients with 5 sessions each, and not one adverse effect. So that was another really good confirmation for them.
It's what people need to know, don't they? I mean, there's so many fears about the unknown that people have, and they have imagined this, that, or the other, or, are you going to read my mind and find out my darkest secrets and all these sort of things, But, it's just an ordinary interaction, the sort of thing that's happening between human beings every day all over the place. This sort of energy transaction that's going on, it's happening all the time, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're just saying, make it positive and having a good intention.
Aren't we lucky that we know all of this? Of course, we don't know all of it, but aren't we lucky that we just know of healing and the wonderful benefits we can have, and the thing of being able to heal ourselves, whether it's a psychological thing like the fear of public speaking that I have worked so hard on, and also physical things that would have involved and was on the verge of involving investigations medically, that I cured myself in an instant once I realized and remembered that I should try healing for myself, where if it had been a friend, I would have instantly suggested having healing. But for myself, I forgot all about trying for myself. And then in 2 seconds, all gone. Amazing. So now it was my turn to feel the wow factor, the awesomeness of being able to heal something that fast. It's amazing. I could feel it zingle out of my body, just moving back. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. In just 2 minutes, when I've had, not 2 minutes even, seconds. And then I felt it zingle, starting to zingle back in. Said, oh, healing, and then it zingled back out, never ever to return again. Incredible. Yeah. Healing is incredible.
Well, we do believe in it. Incredible means we don't believe in it, really, doesn't it? Literally.
It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
It's amazing. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Fantastic. Yeah. I think we've covered, made a few little notes about the things I wanted to raise in the course of our chat. I think I've covered all of them now, really. One thing I did want to ask, when you were next door to Dr. Singh in the hospital, what was on your door?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No, because I would go out and find the person and bring them in. Or, you know, I'd be maybe outside Dr. Singh's room or something, or else they'd be in a chair outside of...
You should have insisted on a nameplate, you know, with healer, you know.
Yes. Initially, I was to fill in their medical records to say that they'd had a healing session, but their medical records could be anywhere and everywhere. So it wasn't, but I thought what we should have is like a big purple stamp to say this person had healing that's noticeable on their records. Some people's records were this thick, sometimes more, the number of years that they've been treated, poor things. But in my view, and probably all of our views, any of these issues that they're seeing the medical world for is rooted in fear of one sort or another expressed that comes out in a physical issue eventually. Yeah. And I think it's all the same, really. All the medical issues are based in fear that started off with, and equally with healing, whichever method you use, really, it's only the passion of the healer that is sorting it out. So it doesn't, I don't think it matters how you trained or who you trained with, but great quality training is necessary.
I think it's got to be, you've got to have standards. That's
yes.
True. I agree with you entirely, you know, that it is, you know, there's different styles, different training, but it is just about the energy. And ultimately, of course, the healing is self-healing.
Yes, it is.
The person receiving is using that energy. And of course, that's just one aspect. Because, I mean, if they've got a whole load of negative beliefs still buzzing around in their subconscious, then that's going to lead them to sort of slip backwards quite quickly, unless we deal with those as well.
You would think so. But I have had the most skeptical people who didn't believe at all. You will have seen the story of the guy in my book who cut the end of his own fingers off. And yes, and he would have ridiculed his wife for seeing me about healing had he have known. So it had to be a deep, dark secret. But once he had this happen, and once he was suffering so badly with pain, that he did, well, I jumped it on him. I said, well, one day you'll let me do my healing on you. And he said, I will do anything. And he was very embarrassed when he came. I had him come round to my house because I knew he wouldn't dream of going to the healing centre. So I did have him as a special dispensation come to my house. And I said, come tomorrow night, because I thought if he thinks about it, he won't come. And when he came, he was so embarrassed. He didn't believe it. He said, this is actually rubbish. I know it can't help. And I don't know why I'm here. And I said, well, you've got nothing else to do now for 20 minutes, so you might as well. And so he came in, sat on one of our dining chairs, and in 20 minutes, he got no pain. So, and he didn't. And every week, he just improved and improved and improved. And fantastic. And now, well, after that, he was telling everybody about healing.
Some wonderful stories of cases that you've put in the book. They really are very uplifting indeed. Of course, skeptics sometimes make the best, you know, publicists about how good the technique is, whatever it is. But when I was talking about negative beliefs, I wasn't so much talking about lack of belief in healing. I was talking about, you know, negative patterns that people have adopted, you know, belief systems about themselves, for example, which is why I think personal development is so important, especially for people in the healthcare profession, including healers, that we ought to be working ourselves to make sure we're good channels for our
Absolutely, and not need to be worried about what the outcome is. Just know that it's for the highest good of all concerned. And you as a doctor will know that people don't make an appointment later on to tell you that they got well, thank you very much. and healers have the same thing, especially in a hospital and especially in a healing group. You might see them once and they're gone. And but that young lad that I mentioned, the young lad that Dr. Singh recorded, he was the only patient that he made the effort to find my phone number, and he phoned me 50 times. It wasn't that many. He phoned me a lot of times, but I wasn't in. And so he just kept ringing and ringing and ringing until I was in, to be able to tell me what happened afterwards, because he was then able to heal himself of anything.
Wonderful.
And that carried on years and years later. Still know that he's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think we could probably chat on for hours, but there's quite a number of questions coming up, if I may leap in. And I haven't obviously, thank you. I'm just going to go back and have a little look at some of these questions, if I may, and ask you some of these. Somebody fairly early on wrote something about Matthew Manning. So something of your experience reminds me that Matthew Manning undertook quite extensive testing around healing effects in laboratory conditions with apparently amazing positive outcomes. This was during the 80s. I'm pretty sure it was during the 70s actually, but possibly the 80s too. I've often wondered how or why nothing more was heard about it. It's wonderful you have achieved this now. Well, I know that there's a lot of stuff about Matthew, and he's out there healing to this day, I happen to know.
That work is referenced in my book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sandy mentioned that she'd given a presentation to the parliamentary group.
Yes.
And I went to a similar presentation of the parliamentary group when it was back before integrated health. It was alternative and complementary with Matthew Manning and the Coventry Cathedral talking about healing. And I think the idea was that they should have been sort of opposite ends of a spectrum and maybe, giving totally different viewpoints of healing. But by the end of it, they were sort of hand in hand pretty well, agreeing on everything and best of buddies. And that was made quite an impact, I think, on the parliamentary group.
Yes, good. I know he was involved in that, and he's. I think he's publishing. The book that he wrote when he was 18, called The Link, has just been republished, I think. So I understand. Now, Philippa has asked a couple of questions, but she was wondering whether could online healing work for Birmingham in Dr. Singh, etc. She wonders. People could sign on perhaps for an hour or two and see whoever sits down for healing. Just a thought, she said, Philippa. I don't know if that might work. We've been doing a lot in the Healing Trust with working on Zoom, doing healing, teaching on Zoom as well, etc. It does work pretty well.
I know healing would work that way. I'm sure. I know healing, absent healing, and every kind of healing we intend does work. But whether we'd be able to go that extra stride out of the norm at a hospital, I don't think so. Yes,
okay, fair enough. And Lynn asks, which version of your book do you suggest we purchase?
You can only purchase the second, the properly purchased one now, because part of the deal was that I take the self-published one off the market.
I remember you telling me that. Yes. Okay, that's your answer, Lynn. And Gillian also asks, perhaps we could collate the healing experiences of Healing Trust members in a book. I'm sure that
would be great.
That would be great, actually.
That would be really great. Well done, Lynn.
Well, there's so many.
Yes,
Jennifer.
But that's great. Have as many as we can.
Sorry, Tim, what did you say?
Is that specifically in healthcare?
She doesn't say, but experience of healing experiences of Healing Trust members in a book.
Yes.
Well, some amazing.
Try and gather all the information about healing in hospitals and clinics, as in your title there, Sandy, all around the UK. Because I'm sure there's probably people working as individuals who you know, we're unaware of, you know, which have happened as local projects. And I'd love to get that all collated and, you know, familiar, you know, at our fingertips, you know, to refer to.
Wow, yes, that's quite, I've written that down. So Dawn has asked, is there information about the peer reviews of the research in the second edition?
The peer reviews, I don't know that those are published. I don't know that they are. I probably would have a copy of them somewhere in an email. So I would have been privy to those, but I don't, they're definitely not in my book.
No, okay. Thank you. And Angie was also putting down how much it would cost to pay a healer in a statutory setting, and she says 6,000 for 1 day a week for a year. So yeah, that's what they would cost. Philippa also says a little bit more about online healing. She feels it has a place in the future and can assist with problems on distance and being local, which is certainly true. And Valerie's asking a similar question. Perhaps Sandy's team could include healers at a distance working on Zoom, for example. So who knows if that might take off. And what else? Oh yes, Philippa said it would be nice to hear about the Doctor Healer Network. For example, how many doctors are part of it and is it expanding, she says.
Well, we were set up, as I mentioned, by Dr. Daniel Benor probably 35 years ago or something like that. Yeah. It's a relatively small organisation because, you know, we have been certainly over the lockdown very dormant. Usually we reckon about 25% at one time have been doctor medical. The majority have always been healers. The number of doctors actively involved has shrunk recently, and we're very much wanting, recently being, you know, maybe the last few years, we're really on a real recruitment drive. We want to get more involved as one of the ways of doing what we've just been discussing of, you know, disseminating healing in hospitals. We need to get doctors on board, and that's why we put on interesting talks. Hopefully people find them interesting. At the moment, Zoom, and then our usual venue is the Rudolf Steiner house up in Regent's
Park,
which is lovely. And so we were having regular talks there, which proved very interesting. But obviously, from far and afield, it's very difficult just to bomb up to London for an afternoon's talk. So I think we're probably going to keep Zoom as a way of doing some of the talks to make sure it's more accessible, you know, countrywide. But yeah, it's a very good point. We need more doctors. We'd like more doctors. If anyone knows any doctors who are vaguely interested in healing, let us know so we can contact them. We have packs to send out to doctors who are interested in healing and healers who are interested in doctors. And you know, we're happy to assist in talking to doctors who might be interested.
Excellent, thank you. And Angie also posted a while ago, there's a general feel-good comment. She's put, Stevenage is advertising for a healer for its renal unit soon as a result of Shuna's work, funded by our charity, so the spread is happening, she said.
Brilliant.
So anybody's in that area wants to do work in Stevenage. And she also said, I think you may have read this one out, there are numerous research trials on Reiki, well regarded by the College of Medicine. And then Elisette asked could you post the name of the 5-part documentary that Tim Ridge mentioned?
Surely. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think we might, I don't know if you want to carry on, Alison, and have a little chat, but we're going to stop the recording, I think, probably about now. But thank you so much, you two, for coming and entertaining our group of people and just
Thank you.
being full
Great
of
fun.
passion
Really,
and
it's a pleasure
enthusiasm.
and an honour. Thank you.
Yes.
Not at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.